One.
Welcome back to the Ballpark Digest Broadcaster Chat. I'm Jesse Goldberg-Strassler, rejoined by Mick Gillispie and Kevin Reichard. Mick, I missed you.
Yeah, I missed you guys too. It was kind of weird not being on the show, but I was had some commitments last week at Smoky Stadium, so it was kind of good to get back in at least around baseball for a couple of days. They had some high school tournaments there. I was a speaker for a softball team that is based out of Indiana, just across the line from the Chicagoland area. I guess it really would be part of the Chicagoland area, but they came down to play in a tournament in Tennessee, and so I went and talked to the group, gave them a ballpark tour, and for at least a day, I felt like I was back to normal again.
Kevin, how have you spent your time recently?
I have been working my butt off. We've been doing the Ballpark Digest Best of the Ballparks, and yesterday we launched the Major League Baseball portion of it, and I'm sure I've already gotten some angry email. So
is it from people in Tampa?
No, interestingly enough, it's from people in Cincinnati and mainly people in Cincinnati. So, they just didn't like what, the ranking that put, that lowered the ranking of Great American Ballpark. Which
you say if you don't like it, vote.
That's exactly what I say. I say, prove me wrong. Prove us wrong. They'd rather complain, though, to be totally honest.
It'd be cool, Kevin, is if you did like an all-time ballpark ranking, like where you could go back and do Ebbets Field and, some of the places in the past, like the Tiger Stadium, Memorial Stadium, which I would vote for, even though it was pretty much a dump. It'd be cool to see, like, what would did you do it? Who won?
We did that once. Ebbets Field won, but the voter turnout was really abysmal. And I'm not quite sure why. It's mainly because I think the only people who care are us ballpark geeks and 70-year-old guys looking to reclaim their 10th birthday.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
I know who are all the people going to bat for the vet. Who are the people who are saying 3 Rivers?
Yeah. 1974 best ballpark.
Yeah. Let's talk cookie cutter.
That's not a bad idea. Maybe do a 1961 expansion edition or 62.
Yeah. Right.
Maybe that's the way to approach. That's not a bad idea. Maybe next year. The one thing that I screwed up on in the major league listings is not including the Field of Dreams ballpark in Dyersville in the voting. Which in retrospect I should have. Someone who's working on that facility pointed that out this morning, sort of jokingly, and I went, "Gosh, that's not a bad. That was a great idea. Too bad it didn't come to me, 4 days ago.
Right.
It probably would have won.
If only that's where the Toronto Blue Jays could play their games this year.
Oh, what a mess, huh? What a mess. So it's not going to be Buffalo. It's not going to be Dunedin. It'll probably be the Trop.
Why do you say the Trop? Because the word that I'm hearing from the Toronto folks is they're going, let's get Pittsburgh. Let's get PNC.
I've heard that a little bit too. The issue is going to be how many players want to hole up in their Dunedin condos. How much the team wants to save on putting up players in Pittsburgh. So, it's a little bit of a mess, to be sure. On all those Buffalo people are very sad because the Blue Jays won't be there.
That would have been a great place too for a major league, some games to be played.
Yeah, the ballpark would have needed better lighting, would have needed a lot of overhaul in terms of broadcasting. And the weird thing is, even though it's the top farm team for the Blue Jays games aren't actually telecast there. That's New York State. So the Mets and the Yankees have all the rights to the Buffalo market in terms of cable.
It was interesting because how in an arbitration hearing for a player, he gets to hear all the worst things said about him by his team, and then they settle it, and now he has to go back to that team after hearing what they really think. That's how it felt to me was, okay, so no Toronto. and Buffalo and the mayor of Buffalo and folks in the city are going, we get major league games here. And that's when we start hearing lighting, clubhouse, just bump, 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 bump. We would rather play somewhere else other than you. It got harsh.
Yeah. Yeah, it got very harsh. And Buffalo is fighting for an intangible in many ways, because no one could get into the ballpark. So it's not as though you'd lining up to see your Blue Jays in action. It's just a pure status thing.
People here in Lansing are talking about, hey, we're in the Blue Jay system. If they don't like Buffalo, are they going to choose us or New Hampshire?
See, that's brilliant marketing, and that's something you guys should be doing. And one of the Blue Jays teams, what is it, Bluefield? They were doing a little social media on that too. It's like, yes, promote the heck out of yourselves.
Yeah, the shame is that, Major League Baseball and this generation of player, probably for the most part, 90%, maybe more, don't realize that the sport was built on playing at minor league stadiums. I mean, they barnstormed across the country. They would bus or train back from spring training and stop in every little town and play. The greats like Babe Ruth and Ted Williams and Jackie Robinson. I tell you guys this probably once a year. My buddy Billy Williams telling me about being a little kid in nearby Mobile, Alabama, and the Indians with Bob Feller against the Dodgers with Jackie Robinson, and they played down there. And he said that when Jackie Robinson stepped off the bus, he looked like a giant to him, and built this place where we have all these Hall of Famers that have come out of this one little town over here with Satchel and Hank Aaron and Billy Williams himself, and Ozzie Smith's from over there, and Stretch, of course, Willie McCovey from there as well, and then a bunch of other guys that were great, maybe not Hall of Famers, but baseball will probably never have a major league team in the state of Alabama. They'll probably never have a major league team in Mobile. They don't even have a minor league team anymore. They have an old stadium. But back in the day, these guys would come in your town and play up until really the early 2000s. I feel like it wasn't crazy to see. Cal Ripken and the Orioles played a game in Chattanooga against the Cincinnati Reds, which was their farm team. To think that you had the Orioles with Cal Ripken and then the Reds and Ken Griffey, I think, was on the team, that come out there and play and just get out there in a community and not only play the game because it's a great game, but also market the sport. And then I feel like these days it's like, this is a great example of, Buffalo could possibly be its own major league city one day. It's not that far off. They have an NFL team. They have an NHL team. And we got a problem with the lights, and we got a problem with the clubhouse, and we got a problem with this, and we got a problem with that. Hey, look, they've been playing baseball in that stadium a long time. I'm sure a lot of the Blue Jays played there as they were coming up through the system. It's always one of those places where people seem to like to play. This time of year would be perfect there. They're not allowed to play in Toronto, and instead they're going to go to Pittsburgh. They're going to go to Tampa. To me, it's like this would be a great opportunity to expand the game even more. And you like you said, Kevin. Look, it's not their media market right now. But if you go in there and you play and you build up a group of people that like your team, they'll find you. You can find a team. I watched the Cubs and the White Sox last night, just like you did, but I watched the Cubs feed from down here, So it's like the way that media works now is that you don't have to be in a team's market to be able to be a fan of the team, and players and all that. So it's disappointing. I would love to see Buffalo or another really strong minor league city that has maybe like an NFL team and professional sports get an opportunity for these Blue Jay games, because I think it would help the game a lot more than going to Tampa, where people don't even show up for the team that they have that wears Tampa Bay on their jerseys.
Yeah, I think you're right in terms of the marketing. The trouble is this is such a short-term plan this season, and it's just a matter of finding a place that works best as a TV studio. And that's really the bottom line.
Wouldn't it be so good, though, to just do an international league tour? hey, let's play a homestand in Charlotte. Let's
Yeah.
play this series in Durham. Just really go to AAA and check out these wonderful ballparks. These are weird circumstances. These are unprecedented circumstances that everyone's just trying to figure things out. And
Yeah.
there are these really good, nice, relatively new ballparks that are right there, that are open, that are not being used.
Let me pose this to you guys. I kind of feel like we're the canaries in the coal mine here, and we're constantly talking about the dangers that our favorite sport, our game is in, and it's like, hey, every week it's something, because there are so many negatives right now. I mean, when I was a kid, baseball was by far America's pastime. It was the most popular sport. And then, strikes and, and maybe some of these contracts that are out of control and people being disappointed with where their favorite player ends up and whatever reason, a whole host of things. I mean, we can sit around and talk about, World Series champions cheating or juice baseballs or steroids or whatever it is. Right now, the game is doing this. We kind of feel like that. I feel like that anyway. You guys agree?
I think that it's been doing that for a while. And I think that you can trace it all the way through the 1980s with the labor strife, with collusion, which came to a head in the mid-1980s, which led all the way up to the 1994 strike, and that affected the 1995 season, and then the PEDs. What has happened is that baseball and the business of it, the ownership right at the top, they are making money, and they're making so much money. And so because of that, I would argue that all of those problems that are problems to us, that are problems in terms of alienating and losing fans, are getting overshadowed by the money makers when they're looking at the money getting made.
Yeah, it's a very selfish approach to the business right now in terms of there seems to be little concern for the sport as a whole versus the business of what helps my team individually. And that's just sort of the way, business is right now, quite honestly. And that's the way baseball's evolved. They can learn a lot from the NBA or the NFL in terms of fostering a sport versus, just working in their own self-interest.
It's been interesting hearing the people trying to buy the New York Mets. And the word was, hey, let's not let this billionaire in because he might spend too much money on players. Alex Rodriguez saying, I'd like to buy the Mets. And also, did you know I'm in favor of a player salary cap? That, I'm Alex Rodriguez. You can forget about my $252 million contract and everything else. So, yeah, it very much is the owner's self-interest above all else, which when you catch teams outright cheating that win world championships, and the biggest scandal to the people at the very top, their biggest problem that they have is their own criticizing, is the players or other teams criticizing the Astros or criticizing teams that cheating, that they consider that to be a bigger problem than the cheating itself, I think tells you a lot.
Now, look at Alex Rodriguez. I mean, he was suspended for an entire season. I saw 60 Minutes, and they posed that there was possibly an attempt to kill the owner of Balco, maybe funded by him. And we've forgotten about this. And now the guy's on Fox every week, and he's actually pretty good on television, and he might own a team. Like the double standard. And I think part of this, too, is how we have changed from the 80s where yesterday was the day where Pete Rose went to jail, remember? But before that, Pete Rose got kicked out of baseball, and he's still not allowed back in. And, and what he did was bad. I mean, gambling on the game, but also when you're possibly involved in a murder for hire plot to save your butt on steroids, I mean, and this guy might own a team. It's just crazy. I mean, and I don't know, look, how accurate that reporting is from 60 Minutes, but I mean, when you have that much money and then you had all of his cousins running around kind of working for him, almost like a little mob, I'm not discounting it. I'm just looking at it and going, how did this guy that got suspended for an entire year become the face of baseball and now might even own a team? And Pete Rose, we've banned Pete Rose like he's Tiger King, like he's in jail forever. We're never going to see Pete again, And when he was on Fox, I thought he was excellent, Pete. But it's the same thing. When he was on TV, I'm like, I like Pete, but what's that say about us if he's not even allowed to be in the game, but he's on TV? And then you got Alex Rodriguez, kind of the same thing,
Yeah, I think it's important to point out that the Rodriguez stuff was a lot of chatter with nothing proven whatsoever, and nothing became of it. And it's real easy to throw the allegations out there without anything behind it. And with Rose, I mean, he admitted to it, so that's sort of a big difference there. I am actually totally in favor of keeping Pete Rose out of the game forever. He bet on the game. He broke the rules. He knowingly broke the rules, and he assumed the rules didn't apply to him. I mean, you have the betting slips in his handwriting, so I have no trouble with that whatsoever. Alex Rodriguez, baseball's got to decide, if they want him in as an owner or not as well. I assume that they see it's worth the risk. I think Jesse was really onto something, because people are afraid Steve Cohen's going to spend too much money on the team. And meanwhile, the third bid is from an organization that runs its teams really well, but obviously gambling is a big part of their business plan in the future. So, are the Mets going to be a media play? Are they going to be a gambling play, or is it going to be a real estate play? I mean, it's not necessarily a baseball play, although, owning one of the two teams in New York certainly has its privileges.
About gambling, I've heard a lot of people say how big gambling is going to play as a part in a sports role for years to come. Ted Leonsis with the Washington Capitals and Wizards has been big into saying, I want to let people bet. I want to let people sit in their seats and bet on how many points this player is going to score in the next quarter or anything like that. So I really do think with sports and gambling that we've got some big conversations ahead of us in every sport. And yeah, how strong of a hand gambling is going to play in the direction of the sports world, whether it's the people who own the teams, whether it's they're sponsoring teams, whatever it might be.
Yeah, I mean, baseball's kind of behind the times in terms of the gambling at the sporting event. Harris Blitzer, who I just mentioned is wanting to buy the Mets. They run sports books with William Hill at their Newark facility. And Ted Leonsis I think he's openly talked about a sports book within the arena in Washington. Right now, I think there's only one baseball team, and that's the Tigers, that have a tie with any gambling enterprise, although I'm sure others will pop up for next year. And that's something the sports has got to watch. I think the fervor behind gambling as a revenue source for teams and the league has sort of eased a little bit, because I think everyone's still waiting to see what happens. Denver is going to have a sports book right outside the gates of Mile High this fall. We'll see how much it's used. But honestly, anyone who has a smartphone has a sports book in their pocket. So I fail to see the need to open a sports book at an arena when I can just sit in my car outside, lay my bet, and go in the arena and bet from there on my phone.
Well, I think that, Jesse, I think you're kind of onto something, because, not an opinion, but I also know from some people that I would say are sources. The game plan for a lot of these teams is they want to have the kiosks in the stadium. And where baseball is, I think, not, and I'm not advocating for gambling or not. I mean, I don't care. Like I've done my Alabama pre and post game shows from a sports book. They pay me to go there. I barely gamble on games. I don't know enough about it. I'm not very good at it. I'll just put it like that. So it's not like I'm like, hey, I'm making a bunch of money on it. It's just a place where we go and work. But I just want to throw that out there. But at the same time, I know that with where football is right now, people bet on football, whether it's fantasy football or just regular betting, right? It's a good sport to bet on. It's easy to bet on. And I feel like between fantasy football and gambling, that's why a lot of the people that I would say novice fans pay more attention to football than baseball because they have some kind of interest in it, right? And I feel like baseball, we've always kind of had this thing where and we had to, right? Because some of the biggest stars in the game were either, like we said, Pete Rose kicked out of the game for gambling on the game. Ty Cobb was accused of it, right? Was a Trice speaker. Yeah. So, I mean, these are the guys with the most hits ever. We had a team in the White Sox team in 1919 that got disqualified for gambling or lost the World Series. Maybe they get disqualified. But a bunch of guys got kicked out. There's rumors that the year before that the Cubs did that. I don't know if any of this is true, but that's what we heard. So the integrity of the game, like boxing with gambling, was damaged. And so baseball has been so set against it, but it's a different world now because it's legal. It's illegal in your state if you want it. You have to vote for it. There's pop-up casinos and all that. And I think that when I want to word this right, I think that the people that call the shots that have to worry about making the money to pay the bills for these teams realize that there is a revenue out there with gambling that will help them, pay the players, that will help them pay their bills, and that is untapped. And I would not be surprised not only if we see kiosks at stadiums soon, but I also could see teams having their own gambling type of broadcasts that would be compared to what you would, like you would watch your regular broadcast, and then here's a gambling type broadcast that would be guys on there that would be talking about the game. Here's the game on TV, and here's different things you can bet on. That just take it from me. I'm not too far off on this.
Yeah, the trouble is most states that have allowed sports betting, and there's only 14 of them, do not allow gambling on premise. That's why at Mile High, it'll be a building next to Mile High where you can be educated on gambling, but you still have to place the bet on your smartphone.
Be on the smartphone, and the place would be next door. Yeah.
Right.
Like the embassy is officially that country's ground. Not so in the United States. If you're at the Uruguayan embassy, you're actually in Uruguay. They could stake up, rezone this kiosk in the stadium. Actually, on this ground, you are not inside the stadium.
Yeah, it's when we go to the casino, it's run by the Choctaw Indians, and Mississippi for the shows. And it's like their country, right? I mean, really, like you go there and it's just a different world. Same thing with, in Arizona during spring training when I'm out there, you go over to Pima and they're, and it's weird. Like the prices are lower in the gas stations because the tax is different, people are, they run on what do they call it? Local time, where everyone's kind of just like not quite as hustle and bustle as so you kind of get used to that too. I learned that when I was in Hawaii, hey, we're going to get there when we get there. We're not going to be so, so hustle. We're not, this isn't New York. It's the opposite, but great people. And just like a side note, I was reading a story from one of my friends who's she's part of the tribe that Corona has really hit the Native Americans, the Choctaws really hard. So, definitely thoughts out there with them. And then Chris Harris, broadcaster of the Mississippi Braves, has it right now. So, thinking about Big Chris as he fights through this Corona.
And just to give it one Mississippi beat, because that's important to dwell on, I want to go back to how money is made. And we were talking about the gambling and TV rights. I think that this is a really important period of time for teams and ownership, because what you're basically challenging every single team and network on is, if we take away the fans, how are you going to figure out how to make money? And all of this is, in the end, getting back to that point from 15, 20 minutes ago, all about how is money made and how can more money be made. So I'm curious to see what discoveries people come to, what realizations people come to as this month, 2 months goes on and they go, no fans, we can reach out to people, we can make money in this way through baseball, through other sports.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to inevitably segue to a streaming future. And, that's why I've been excited with teams like the Cubs reclaiming their streaming rights from MLB and being able to set up something on an endeavor like Marquee. And of course, this year was a terrible time to unveil Marquee. It would have been nice a year ago, and then being in a position to sell streaming directly. So I think teams are going to be much more willing to do that. I mean, that's why Steve Cohen, in his bid for the Mets, also has bid for SNY. And that's why it's important that the Yankees now have their own streaming rights and also own a chunk of yes. But making money. Did either one of you notice in last night's game, and this was true the night before in the Yankees-Mets game at Citi Field, there's some new advertising spots popping up on the field. At Citi Field, there's like grocery store ads along the outfield foul line. And there's also logos on the pitcher's mound in the back where they used to like draw in a little, Mets logo. Now it's Ford, a round Ford logo. Sloan had the same thing at the Cubs game last night.
I remember when Spider-Man was advertised on bases, and people immediately were like, whoa, 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 whoa. Yeah, I really think that we're going to continue to see boundaries pushed.
Yeah.
And there was something on the base last night. I didn't get a close look, but on the base, there was some sort of lettering. It could have actually been a Sloan logo for all I know. But we're just seeing that pop up now in unusual spots. And I think it's going to get worse. I think we're going to see on-screen logos now continually, a la soccer, as the games progress.
This
shit. I can remember. Sorry, Jesse. Yeah, I can remember having this debate with some of the writers, Cubs beat writers, about this giant noodle that was outside. It was like a noodle statue promoting something, outside of Wrigley Field, and the company, I think it was Kraft, paid, $250,000 or some crazy number to have the thing out there, right? And there was this feeling amongst some of the writers that, hey, look, this is excessive here. You know what? We got Billy Williams out here, a statue, Ron Santo, Harry Carey, and this noodle, But here's where my perspective is different than them, and I respect those guys a lot. But being on the minor league side and the sales side of the business, when you've never had to make that sales call to try to figure out how you're going to bring in those corporate dollars, you realize like it's not that easy. It's not like people just come and hand you their money. I mean, like there's a perception that it's that way, but it's not like that. To make the amount of money that it takes to not only pay the players, which is half of the money, right? You got to pay overhead, you got to pay taxes, you got to pay, all the employees. I mean, it's not like you're taking the other half of the money and then you're sending it out. The value of these teams is when the owners sell them, because then you're going to get the $2 billion that it's worth. But when you're operating, it's, and I know this for a fact, that the margins aren't as big as you would think, right? So going out there and selling that noodle is getting you closer to the goal that it takes, right? And how intrusive is a giant noodle outside? It does not bother me. But I've also been on that phone call before when I'm trying to convince Kraft to, hey, please put your noodle outside of Smoky Stadium. We'll take it. You can put it out there for $10,000, right? It's a much smaller deal. But I'm not in favor of like watching, when you watch Winter League games and the uniforms look like look like NASCAR uniforms, as I sit here and promote my beer show right on this. It's like, I get, there's got to be kind of like a happy medium, but having a logo on the back of the mound or having something in the grass, having the batter circle sponsored, instead of foul poles and all that stuff that we do in the minor leagues. I don't think that's bad. And I understand that this year, without the fan-driven revenue, the owners are going to take a bath. I mean, I was watching that game last night, and I'm thinking these guys have to be losing their behinds, because I've never seen a game at Wrigley Field where it's even halfway empty. Like even when the team stinks, there's like at least 70-80% of people are there. And they've been, since 2015 when Joe Madden took over and they made all those changes, it's packed. It's a tough ticket to get right now. Last night, it's empty. And I'm thinking, like those seats behind home plate, you know, they're, how much are they? $200 a pop, you know, all the way in there, 40,000 seats, 45,000 seats. You know, no, you're not selling any beer. You're not selling any hot dogs. It's a lot of money being lost every single time they open that stadium up. So it could look a little bit different this year. The thing that I'm afraid of is when we get back to normal, you know, and next year when fans are in the stands, or later this year, if, you know, everyone's in there with a mask on. I hope it's not like the DH I think is going to be, where we're just never going to see the pitchers bat again, right? And so I wonder if, like, we're always going to have, like, all this extra advertising that we thought, well, you know, we didn't really need it before. We're doing it now out of emergency. Hey, everyone's used to seeing, you know, the logo of Ford behind the pitcher's mound, you know. So I'm curious to see how that turns out. But I feel like I'm on both sides of this, right? I understand that that you have to do things to be creative to get to, you know, the revenue that you need. I just hope that it doesn't turn into where, you know, you can't watch the game without seeing, you know, a million logos everywhere and drown each other out.
Well, I think it's a certainty that the next CBA will allow for sponsor patches on the uniform. I think that that's an accepted way of doing business in the sports world. NBA does it fine. MLS does it fine. Your NFL will, you know, I think MLB, it's inevitable, especially if you have a broadcast set up like it was last night. And you mentioned you watched the Cubs feed. I watched the ESPN feed. I enjoyed it in many ways because the production value seemed really high. A lot of player close-ups. Versus, you know, the crowd and the span of the field. And you're going to see those being perfect spots for sponsor logos on uniforms. You know, already got the whoosh with Nike on one side, and then just put the sponsor logo on the other. Bam.
Kevin, is
What
there
if they let the players sell their own advertising? Would that be something?
Never in a minute.
Kevin, is there
unless they want to take less money.
Yeah, right.
Is there anything, Kevin, that you've seen sponsorship try to do anything where you said, that's too much for me?
I kind of thought the Sloan logo on the back of the mound was actually too much, and the Ford logo the same way. I would rather have. I think that once you're on the field to play, on the literally the field to play, you're starting to intrude on the game itself. That's why sponsor logos don't actually bother me. But a decal on the pitcher's mound actually kind of bothered me.
The two things that bother me are, in minor league ballparks, when there's sponsor reads for every foul ball. Every single time that there's a foul ball, that they have to say, foul ball was presented by this sponsor. Anything that constantly intrudes. And so I get bothered in TV broadcasts whenever they're starting to slip in those spots in between at-bats. Yeah. So when a bat finishes, a guy grounds out, and they slip in a spot and they go picture in picture as the next batter is coming up to home plate, and it's a 30-second, 60-second. That, to my mind, just like that PA read, it disrupts the tempo of a game for me.
I agree.
We had that last night on the ESPN feed. Was there any of that in the Cubs feed last night?
I don't remember seeing any of that, but I mean, let's just kind of go back to Jesse's point. I mean, us as broadcasters, like one year they sold strikeouts on the radio broadcast, and it was like after a game, I'm like, guys, look, and we might have 20 strikeouts. I can't, after every single strikeout, say blah blah blah. I said, we got to cap this somewhere, you know, like I'll hit them at the beginning of it, and then how about when I go through the line score and I'll say so and so hospital strikeouts, they had 15, you know, like. It is so disruptive of us as play-by-play artists, Jesse, because we're over there trying to think like impromptu, and it's like, oh man, I forgot to say, you know, the so-and-so hospital strikeout again. Like it really is tough. And I think that's where you get to that point where you're like, man, there has to be some kind of a way to do this and not disrupt the broadcast itself.
We had our double plays sponsored in Montgomery, Alabama, which probably sounded like a great idea at the time. You get what, 2-3 double plays in a game. Double plays, by and large, end innings. So it would be a spectacular 6-4-3. It would be a smash of a line drive caught by the first baseman who steps in behind the runner. And we got to get to a commercial break. And here comes this long read because it was a double play. It just did not work.
No, I know, but I know exactly what you're talking about. And then you're like, do I read this thing here and then I'm coming back late and missing the first pitch of the next inning? Or do I go out and then somebody in corporate's not happy with you because they want to get that in really fast? And then the other thing is that, you know, every team's different the way that they line up their spots. Well, the Smokies have always had 90-second spot breaks, you know, in between innings. It's 3 commercials normally. Sometimes it's a 60 and a 30. And then if you have a bump or some bump music or whatever, I mean, you're stretching this thing out. It's, you know, you're barely getting back in time to call the game. Well, if you do 60 seconds, well, then you're not paying for it the way that you could, you know, because you're putting in there not just the, you know, the Sloan commercial, you know, or the chip commercial or the hot dog commercial. You're also promoting the different elements at the stadium too. Hey, you know, next week's Buck Night or whatever, you know, the corporate sales team's got this going on. Like, so you're trying to squeeze all this in there. And like you said, you get to the point where you're just like frazzled because instead of just like calling the game, you're really more of a salesman, you know, and you have to balance that in a way because the fans hold us accountable. It's like, man, I listen to this Mick guy and all I hear are Hooters ads, you know. That happened to me in Salem, which I didn't mind. Hooters and Yingling, the 2 things I still like, but you know, it's like they were our big sponsors, so we had to hit them a lot.
When I was calling a Blue Jays spring training game this past March, the Blue Jays have a home run read. Every time somebody hits a home run, you've got to do the home run read. And I was always taught, you call the home run, gone. Here's the new score, and then you get out and you let the crowd go crazy. All right, so gone, Blue Jays lead 2-1. Home run read. It's long. So I got to let the moment breathe. And now I'm doing the home run read during Randall Grichuk's entire at-bat.
You know how you know the best way to handle that is you make fun of yourself right on the air. You know what I mean? Like you're just like,
you got to be self-aware.
Yes. Like if you go and admit it and kind of just let everyone in on what's going on. And I know it's tough to say that when we're doing like 2 games, you know, like, you know, but you know what I'm saying? Like sometimes like, hey guys, guess what? I've got that strikeout ad, you know, like it's going to be a long one, but let me tell you, you know.
I'm sure I've told this story on Ballpark Digest Broadcaster Chat before, but on the subject of coming back late in half innings because whatever happens, and then the pitcher wraps up his warm-up pitches and suddenly you've got a game going on. I was in Dayton and I missed the first batter of the inning. The first batter grounded out and I didn't see it. We had all sorts of other things going on. I was late getting to the break. Suddenly they've started it up. And so I'm going, all right, here are the batters coming up. And I'm going, oh no, they skipped a guy in the lineup. Oh, maybe they made a lineup change and I didn't see it. And so I'm going through and now the bases are loaded and there's 1 out and I'm super excited even though there was this lineup change and we skipped a guy and then a guy got out and now they're running off the field with 2 outs and I was entirely flummoxed.
Hey, how about this? Like your old team, the Biscuits, which I love the logo. You know that. I'm a fan of the Biscuits logo. They had a manager named Morgan Innsberg, the former player last year. And I don't know why it was so difficult for him, but he couldn't get the right lineup to the press box. It was like it just continuously happened, you know? Like something would change, and for some reason, like it was just so complicated to him to like call upstairs and go, hey man, we got a change in the lineup. Like I'm talking like 5 or 6 times, like, and it's the same thing you're talking about. Like all of a sudden you're like the game starts and you're like, oh, that'll be Kevin Reichard. And then you look down and it's like, no, it's Jesse Goldberg-Strassler. What's he doing up there? You know? And you're just, your book's messed up. All the computer stuff upstairs is messed up. You know, it's like, we didn't skip one, but I'll tell you, it is so difficult to kind of get back on track when something like that happens, because it's not always just that guy's not in the lineup. It's like, well, this guy went from playing third to shortstop. The shortstop's out of the game. You know, this guy's in and the lineup's all different, and then you're trying to change stuff and call the game, and then you have that strikeout like so it's like you get all these other things going on. They're coming at you at once, and you have to stay cool. That's one of the things I try not to let the audience in on, because it's so minor league. Like I always feel like, gosh, man, we seem like we are just down here where we can't even get the lineup right. Like the easiest part of the whole game is like the lineup, and we got that wrong. So when the lineup gets messed up, your world can be very, very tough to bounce back from. It's messed up.
Just the way we hear about it, the way we find out. I've been calling a game, and it's like, line drive to left, Neil comes in. That's not Neil.
Yeah. Do you call it? Do you call it and then like go back and fix it, or do you change it right there? Because I call it.
It depends.
And then go back and fix it later.
We were playing a game against the Lake County Captains. I'd never seen them before in my life. I don't know who any of these players are. So I'm just going through calling the top of the first inning. There were no uniform numbers that I could see, so I'm just trusting whoever is where they are. And then suddenly the runner who's stepping his lead off of second base turns around. I'm going, that guy grounded out. So who's this batter now? And the batter, somehow I get to see his uniform number. I'm going, he's the guy I got on deck. So I've got no clue who anyone is or where anyone should go, and it's just a mess. And so, yeah, if it's a circumstance where I can quickly correct it right there and there, or if it's a circumstance where I just call it and then I fix it during the commercial break.
Right. And what I'll do is call it, because if something happens and it's a highlight, I don't want to be like correcting myself in the highlight.
No.
And then go back later, maybe like a couple pitches later and say, hey, that was so-and-so. It was really funny. It was I was on Marquee with Len and Cole Wright in Vegas, and they had changed out the catchers. And those spring training games, now that happens a lot, where they'll just switch guys out and you don't know it. But it was one catcher, and it turned out to be another guy for the Reds. And so call the action, and Len's like, after the play, he's like, hey, that's Stevenson and not so-and-so. And I'm like, all right, look, let me recall this. And then the guys on the truck can fix it for the replay. I'm totally kidding, right? But then I recall it, nice play by Stevenson. And then I'm like, guys on the truck, you guys can handle that. And tomorrow no one will ever know. We all laugh, It's like, just kind of keep light of the situation. I think it's, people understand too, especially in spring training. That's going to happen to you, unless Len never happens to Len. Like, I don't know how he's amazing at being able, but all the rest of us mortals, they get us. They sneak a guy in or two, and especially when they're wearing equipment, it's tough to tell. But I read a book, and I'm trying to think of whose book it was. Maybe it was Red Barber, that broadcasted the whole. Were you talking about this the other day? Maybe Jesse. He broadcasted the whole game, and it was the wrong pitcher. Did you bring that up?
Notably to Phil Rizzuto.
Okay, it happened to Phil Rizzuto.
Holy
cow.
Yeah.
So like somebody just slid in, and then like they go back, and it was like a left-hander, and instead of and the other pitcher was a righty. He didn't even notice.
There's the classic case to my mind is the 1960 World Series, Pirates-Yankees. Bill Mazeroski comes up to home plate, and Chuck Thompson on the broadcast says, Art Ditmar throws, and it's Ralph Terry on the mound for one of the great moments in baseball history.
Yeah. Chuck Thompson's my idol. You know that. He was my mentor. I got to know Chuck. Like, I wanted to be Chuck, like when he would call my phone and leave me voicemail messages. I mean, it was amazing. It just meant so much to me, and getting to know him and his wife, Betty. And I think he's one of the greatest broadcasters ever. But I'll go back and listen to his games from 1970 World Series or whatever, 66 when he was with Baltimore. Sometimes he would like fill in and do like the national games, and he makes mistakes, and it's like, I don't look at that and go, oh, he's terrible. I look at it and go, he's human, and I'm human, because there's times where you make mistakes on the air. Ralph Kiner wrote a book that is a great read for any of you guys that like to read about, former players and broadcasters. I think it's called Kiner's Corner. It's awesome though. He talks about how he owned up to his mistakes that he would make on the radio, and how tough it was to do games and not make mistakes, right? And he said, early in my career, I'd get real mad. And then he said, like, all of a sudden, I just was like, you know what? I'm just going to have fun with this too, we try so hard on the air to be perfect, and we want our games to sound as professional as possible, but we all make mistakes, and it's like knowing that Chuck made that mistake and others kind of makes me feel better when I'm calling the wrong catcher making a play. I got to go back and fix it.
People will forgive mistakes, especially if you laugh at them and just move on. It's the perfectionist who denies the mistake ever happened in the first place who's going to get flailed.
Yeah.
Would you two like a baseball thesaurus, baseball lingo for today?
Absolutely.
Perfect. Let's do it.
Today I chose battery. Let me hold up the book. So you're starting battery, right? The catcher and the pitcher. Okay. How did the term battery come to describe the catcher and the pitcher? Do either of you know?
I got to say this, like last night I'm watching Marquis, Len and JD were talking about all of the baseball references that date back to boating, like the captain and the, in the hole used to be in the hold, and I was laughing about that, so I don't know. I guess with that theme in mind, right? I'm going to say that battery somehow has to do with a ship's battery.
So it's military.
Military.
Henry Chadwick gives this from the 19th century. It's the pitcher and catcher are the main attacking force of the little army of 9 players in the field. The catcher provides the ammunition, and then the pitcher with the bullet has the rifle. There's all sorts of militaristic ways to describe, right? A guy with a strong arm has a bazooka or has a howitzer. We say sometimes about pitchers that there's only so much bullets in the gun for a guy whose arm might break down at any moment. So initially in the 19th century, the pitcher was the battery and the catcher was his battery mate. And then as time went on, the battery was used to describe to both of them. So yeah, very much the military use, describing the pitcher firing the baseball in.
That's awesome. Yeah, like military is another place where a lot of baseball terms come from, right?
Yeah.
So you got, and I'm sure it's because so many guys served in the military where they would have to do that. If you got drafted, you went in there, you use those terms in baseball, boating, and ships. I'm sure like being in the Navy probably is where why those terms came from, kind of military. And then, it's fun, like golf, some terms come from golf. But you do a great job, man. I love hearing these. Like, I like the ones that I'm not really sure about because it's like, I'll just file it back here for later.
But we use them. You and I will say, here's your starting battery for tonight.
Every night. Yeah. We sponsor that. The starting battery is brought to you by Batteries Plus. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Well, when you listen to the Smokies, you'll know that.
And you guys would be a AA battery.
We would.
So on that note, let's wrap things up for this week. What a fabulous conversation, really ranging the gamut of topics, and good to get right back at it. Mick Gillispie, any final thoughts?
I want to promote my Mick and Brick beer review show. Got some swag here. It's on Facebook. Mick and Brick beer review. It started during quarantine. Run every single day and then drink a beer afterwards. And then, we get on there and just it's like a 5-minute show, 6-minute show. But my other love besides baseball is a cold beer. So they seem to go hand in hand. I didn't have baseball until last night, but it's been a lot of fun. So I'm just trying to log in some episodes and have a little fun with it. I love it when people get on there and tell me what their favorite beer is. My cousin lives in Madison. So I've gotten a lot of beers from Wisconsin. And I can tell you, Kevin, you guys have some really good beers up there. Been so impressed. Yeah, so impressed.
We do. I happen to live like 2 miles away from one of the best breweries in the state. So we end up there in the
Which one?
Capital.
Okay.
So we end up a lot on the in the beer garden there.
Nice.
Under the shade, socially distanced, but it's open. Going for business, and it's summer island wheat and Hefeweizen season out there right now.
Oh yeah, yep. Perfect weather for it.
Kevin, any final thoughts?
Not really. This week, as I was pumping earlier, is the best of the ballparks for Major League Baseball week. Book announcement week as well. Thursday should see a new cover and a new title released. And then Thursday is opening night. And we'll see, it'll be fun to see real action. And I'm hoping it's a little higher energy than the ESPN broadcast last night. I so wish I could have gotten into the Cubs broadcast because, you know, it was pretty low energy until Chipper Jones and Anthony Rizzo started giving each other crap. That was the turnaround. But before that, it was like Sutcliffe and Boog were sort of sleepwalking.
You know me. I'm a high energy guy. I like
you would have been perfect out there, although you would have just shamed Sutcliffe and even Chipper to an extent.
Yeah. Like Mick and I, you can feel. Love some baseball.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not afraid to light the fuse.
That's right. That's right. We need spark plugs around here. This has been your Ballpark Digest Broadcaster Chat. Thank you very much for listening, for watching. Check out ballparkdigest.com.